And the reason why I'm giving my abortion testimony today is so people can understand that abortion is not just over as soon as it is done. They tell you that, hey, have the abortion, you can go back to life as normal. For me, that it was not so. I had my abortion back in 1998. I got married to my high school sweetheart, and we had a 5-year plan. We weren't going to start a family for 5 years, but about 3 months after getting married, we found out we were pregnant. I was ecstatic. I was so happy. I was going to be a mom. I had always wanted to be a mother. To say my husband at the time was less than happy is very, very understated. Right away, he told me that we were not having this child. Then it went on to him threatening to kill me and threatening to leave me. I did not want to be a single mother. I had friends who were single parents, and I saw that it was tough. I even went so far as to move out of my home with my husband at the time. And I moved in with my brother, and my brother was going to help take care of me. But I went back to my husband because he said, you know what, I understand how you feel. We'll just work through this. And I thought that meant that he had given up the notion of abortion. At this time, I was totally pro-choice, but it wasn't the choice for me. I was married, and married women just didn't have abortions. Shortly before Thanksgiving of 1998, my husband told me there's no way that we could afford to have a child. There's no way that anybody would want us to have a kid at this point. We were too young. I did not want the abortion, and he forced me into the abortion. He took me to the abortion clinic, and as we pulled into the drive, he told me that you will have the abortion. Do not come out unless you do, or I will kill you. So I walked in to a room that was filled with girls with cotton balls on their arm. I was just thinking, oh, everybody's here for STD testing. Seemed reasonable. And then I gave my money to the cashier, $300 for an abortion. And I went back to this pre-counseling area where this girl, who was maybe 18, 19, she asked me why I wanted the abortion. And I said, I don't want to have an abortion. My husband wants me to have the abortion. She goes, so this isn't your choice? And I said, no. I said, he's threatening to kill me if I don't do this. I said, he will either leave me or kill me. She said, I recommend you not have this abortion because you will likely suffer. I got on my hands and knees, crying, begging her to let me have an abortion. An abortion I didn't want just because my husband told me I had to do it. After she said yes, I signed some papers. Then I went to get RH typed. That's to see if I'll be able to carry, if I had marriage negative, they gave you a shot so you can carry another pregnancy. I got a cotton ball. I was now about 31 women in the waiting room with a cotton ball. It was a little bit later that I got called back to go have the abortion done. I was given a gown and I changed. This lady who's supposed to be a counselor was standing on one side, and on the other side of the table was my husband at the time. And he held my hand, not in support. I had a bruise from his whole handprint. because he held my hand so tight to make sure I didn't leave. This little old man came in. He never introduced himself. I have no idea who he was. I laid down, and on the ceiling they had an orchid, a picture of an orchid. As I was laying there, all of a sudden I felt somebody's cold hands touch my thighs, open my legs, and I felt pain. Nobody told me what was happening or what the procedure was. And they said that I was roughly 16 weeks pregnant. That's 4 months pregnant. I had no idea. Shortly after his announcement of how far along I was pregnant, I heard this vacuum cleaner turn on. That's what I thought it was. I didn't understand why a vacuum cleaner was turning on. Then I felt more pain, and I said, "Stop." I screamed, "Stop. Please, let me go. I don't want this. Let me go." They told me to shut up and lay back down. They got 3 more people to hold me down to perform this abortion that I did not want. After the abortion was finally performed, I got up, went to put on a sanitary pad, went to the recovery room. There was a little child, maybe 12 years old. She was bouncing on one of these recovery chairs. And she said, "I did it, Grandma. Can we go have ice cream now?" That day I went home. And I had taken the day off of work. And on TV, there was a program about a high school girl who made a tough choice. She decided to keep her baby and parent. I couldn't believe I was so weak, so stupid, that a child, a 16-year-old, somebody who's 3 years younger than me, made the choice. And she stuck by it. That night was the first of many nights my husband came home, and he raped me. You're not supposed to have sex, I was told, for at least 2 weeks after your abortion. I became very, very ill. I had to go to an emergency clinic for antibiotics. Come to find out that I have severe scarring in my uterus. I couldn't live with myself. I was angry. I was upset. And every time my husband and I tried to interact at that time, it came back to the abortion. Finally, he grabbed me by my hair. He threw me down on the floor, put his hands around my neck, was strangling me, and started punching me in the face, in the arms, everywhere he could get. At the time, I did call the police. And it was in Linn County, Iowa. I decided to stay with him because I felt he owed me a child. I did not love him. I did not even love myself. The rape was not the only thing that had happened. The abuses that he performed on me, but also what I started doing to myself. I began cutting myself. I began drinking. I hated myself. I was unworthy of love. I was unworthy of living any longer. I attempted suicide for the first time about 3 months after my abortion. I would go on to attempt suicide 5 more times. And one time I ended up in a cardiac care unit because I overdosed on lithium. I was diagnosed as having bipolar disorder and borderline personality disorder. Through intense counseling and psychiatric care, they figured out why this happened. It all led back to my abortion. It wasn't until 2002 that I finally decided to try to leave my husband permanently. While we were in Houston, Texas, he came to my job. Well, actually, before he came to see me at work, he became angry with me. And he was dragging me by my hand after he had started strangling me. He started dragging me into the kitchen by my arm. I thought he was going to take a knife and kill me. I ended up going to the Fort Bend County Women's Shelter. And at that time, they took pictures of the bruising, and I was able to get a restraining order against him. I still had to work. I was working in management at a bookstore, at a mall. And one particular day, I answered the phone at work, and he said he was coming to kill me. I didn't know what to do. So I called mall security. I'd been there 4 years. They knew me. Called mall security, and they called some police. They had undercover officers. And I was at a kiosk in the middle of the mall. And he had what looked like a gun in his front pocket. And he said to me, "Jenny, I'm going to kill you." Everyone thought he had a gun, including myself. They were able to apprehend him. He's never allowed on the property again. I was given the opportunity to file charges against him for domestic violence and terroristic threats. I decided not to. I fled with my life back to Cedar Rapids, Iowa, where I'm from. In 2002 was one of my last suicide attempts. I overdosed. I cut myself. I felt unworthy of love. I couldn't go to church. I was raised believing in Christ. And that no sin was unforgivable, but I felt mine was. I felt I was no better than Timothy McVeigh. I had killed somebody. I felt there should be retribution. Somebody should take me and just kill me, put my head on a stake. What happened after my suicide attempt is I got out, my last suicide attempt. And I picked up a phone book. I was like, when was the one time that I was happy? When I was a child, when I had Christ, when I had faith. And I picked up a phone book, opened to churches, let the pages fly, stuck a finger on it. Immaculate Conception Church, Catholic. Okay, I wasn't Catholic. Let's go for it. Picked up the phone and I called and I said, "Hey, I want to be Catholic. What do I have to do?" "You're in luck. Tomorrow is the catechism. You can become Catholic after that." I was lucky. I started going through the catechism, and I had a really hard time understanding the forgiveness of sins, in that there was no sin that was unforgivable. Shortly after becoming Catholic then, I went through the catechism, and there was something called Rachel's Vineyard. I went to a retreat. And the Rachel's Vineyard retreat is put on by the Archdiocese. And this particular one was at the American Martyrs Retreat House in Cedar Falls, Iowa. And while there, part of it is you finally share what happened in your abortion. Because I had never told anybody of my abortion at that time. So you shared. And then they asked you what you want to be healed. And they were going to wrap it. And then they were going to unwrap you. And it would be like lifting of the sins. Lifting of your own self-hatred. I asked for my mind to be healed and for my womb to be healed. They wrapped us with toilet paper. It had been a stormy, stormy day. Clouds, rain, and the room had 3 walls that were glass. they started undoing my eyes first. And I saw this wonderful, it was just bright, sunshiny, just lights. And I felt warm and happy for the first time. I felt that I could finally live with this. I started doing a Bible study after that, and just on my own, and I kept praying, please, I want somebody to love. I'm scared to be alone. If I am lovable, let me be able to love somebody else again. So what happened was shortly after this wonderful moment of experiencing Christ for the first time, I met my husband, my current husband, Brian Minnie. My divorce had been finalized in 2002. Brian and I met in 2004. We were married in 2006. At that time, I wanted to start a family. I was very excited to try to have children or adopt. And my husband said, you know what? You're still really dealing with this abortion. I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm working, I'm healthy, I'm happy. He told me, you're just wearing a mask. He said, I see you cry. I know how you actually feel. You still haven't forgiven yourself. I went to Aid to Women in Cedar Rapids, and I took a Bible study course. And while I went through that Bible study, the very last day of the Bible study, as you graduated, you were able to, they had business cards, and you were able to put on your business card any note you wanted to write to anybody who would find these helium-filled balloons. Mine was, I murdered my child. I still suffer. My husband, Brian, his said, Josephine, which is what I named my baby, his said, Josephine, I'm sorry I was not your father. I will meet you one day in heaven. So I'm here today to tell you that an abortion does not end all of your problems. When you go in there to have that abortion, it starts a whole host of things you never thought you would ever have to deal with. Psychiatric disorders, cutting, alcoholism, suicide, self-loathing, and hatred. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Jennifer. Thank you very much. Next, we have Roxy Richard to address our committee. Roxy?
I'm right here, hon.
Oh, I'm sorry. Didn't know where you were.
Thank you for having me.
Because we've been 25 minutes into our meeting now, and so...
Okay, well, I'm here because I'm regional coordinator for the state of Iowa for Silent No More Awareness Campaign, and Jennifer came on board for her area. And I was in the 70s, I was on the pill and I got really sick and went to the ER, and I told them I thought I might be pregnant, and they pumped my stomach out and gave me 11 x-rays, and the next day came in and told me because of what they had done to me, my doctor suggested abortion. And I did not know any better. It was hell on earth. And everything that Jennifer said, mine was the same, only different for me. And
You mean the 11 x-rays in the procedure put your child at risk?
the 11 x-rays that the hospital did, yes, my doctor strongly suggested I had an abortion because of what they had done to me the night before.
What'd you do to the hospital if you wanted that child so badly? Did you sue the hospital?
No, I did not. I was young and dumb, and I didn't know any better, sir.
Okay.
So I got to Iowa City, and for the abortion, And I got on the table, and suddenly my legs were spread wide, and there was a sucking noise, and I realized it was coming out of me. And I screamed, "Stop, stop." And they said, "It'll be okay, it'll be over in a minute." And they gave me a shot of something, and the next thing I knew, I was on the side of the road puking my guts out. And it took many, many years to forgive myself. I became very angry and very controlling and bitter and a drug addict. And when I went to Rachel's Vineyard, the Lord showed me I also had 3 miscarriages after my abortion because of the scarring from the abortion. And the Lord showed me there was a little boy with Jesus, and then a little bit over were three little girls, and they all had bright red hair. And I took that as my abortion was Seth and my miscarriages, so I have a Josie, Marie, and Caitlin. And this here, this is the precious one. This shows the baby at 12 weeks. I was 10 weeks when they did the abortion. Now, I'm sorry, but I don't understand how anyone can sleep at night when they are allowing this to happen. This is what they're taking out of a woman's body, sir. And these telemed abortions, there's no love in them, none. There's no love in abortion whatsoever, at all. But you go into the Planned Parenthood and there's a nurse in the room with you, and you're pregnant, and the doctor comes via webcam. He pushes a button, he opens the drawer where you're at and gives you the pills. You go home, you take the pills, you have the baby in the toilet, and it gets flushed into the sewer system. This is murder, and this has got to stop. And that is why I am silent no more. There is someone that has got to speak for these babies that cannot speak for themselves. And I really pray that you do not even consider abortion, and it is all stopped. It should be unthinkable. Unthinkable. It is not a tissue. It's a human being. The heart beats at 24 days. You know, all this explains it, and I'll pass it so you can see it. There's stuff on the back that tells what each week represents. And it's allowed to do these abortions, and look at that. That is not a piece of tissue. That is a baby. And I guess I need to share that for years and years I did not understand that that's why I was so messed up, was because of the abortion. I never connected the two, ever. And then one night I was surfing on the internet, and I went to Priest for Life, which led me to Rachel's Vineyard Abortion Recovery Retreat, and I also was in Cedar Falls. And there's healing. And abortion does not affect just you, the woman that goes through the procedure. It affects everyone that's in your life. It's a long trail. You know, it's cut and dried. It has to stop. And I would really appreciate if you would please consider that. Just stop it. And thank you for listening.
Thank you. Representative Pearson has brought to us a bill that we are looking at today. It's not a long bill at all, and it cuts right to the point. I'll read this bill. The sovereign state of Iowa recognizes that life is valued and protected from the moment of conception, and each life from that moment is accorded the same rights and protections guaranteed to all persons by the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the State of Iowa, and the laws of this state. The Iowa Supreme Court shall not have appellate jurisdiction over the provisions of this section. This act, being deemed of immediate importance, takes effect upon enactment. This is the bill that we are looking at today. We have heard from 2 individuals who have spoken for the bill. Are there any other people in the audience today who would like to speak against the bill?
Representative Heaton, I do have some questions I would like to go through on the bill, if that would be okay. I don't know if you want to hear from other people first, or you'd like to come back to me, but I know I talked to you earlier about I have a lot of questions about the bill.
If you have questions about the bill, I would request that you refer them to Representative Pearson, who is the author of the bill.
Sure. I would be happy to do that. Thank you for sharing your stories, and you have some, very disturbing stories to tell, and I'm sorry for what you've been through. I have questions because I think this is more than, it's a very simple bill, but I think there are a lot of unintended consequences, and I think we need to look at that. Many things aren't, because of the brevity of the bill, perhaps many things are not included in it. But I guess my first question to you, Representative Pearson, is can you tell me what your intent is for the bill? What's the purpose of the bill?
Well, the real issue, in my estimation, is that life is sacred and it's worthy of protection. And so the real purpose of this bill is to do just that. It's to protect all life from the moment of conception till natural death. And I believe that abortion is murder. And so the purpose of the bill is to turn our culture away from that of death to life.
And so your bill says life is protected from the moment of conception. Now, does this mean that a woman who decides to terminate her pregnancy will be subject to prosecution?
This means that any laws that we have on our in the code or the Constitution of the United States, that would apply. So if she does decide to terminate her pregnancy, then she would be subject to our laws.
Okay, so this would be considered murder, so probably intentional murder, because
It would have to be. You're talking about the intent of a person. You're not talking about an accidental fall down the stairs type of thing. We're talking about intent, and that goes to the doctor as well.
So a doctor or a woman would be potentially now charged with first-degree murder, which is that life in prison without parole in the state of Iowa. Is that correct? It is. It's life in prison without parole.
And one of the things, if I might, is that, when you're talking about, we already have homicide laws on the books. And so you come to it with this idea that the only value to a human being is whether or not the mother wants the child or not. And that is not where I think we should place our value. It's in the actual human being made in the likeness and image of God.
Thank you. The next issue, and I appreciate your honesty, and I appreciate your passion. I am concerned about contraception, and I think that many families rely upon contraception for family planning, and it's my understanding that birth control works in 3 ways: by preventing a woman from releasing an egg, by preventing her from ovulating, by preventing fertilization, or by creating a change in the uterine lining, which would reject the fertilized embryo. I understand that it's impossible to know which way that birth control method worked with each circumstance. Under this bill, I think the third option would violate the code, this code section. So will the state be forced to ban contraceptions to ensure that no fertilized egg is lost? Do you see that as being a problem if we had to ban contraception for many families in Iowa?
No, I don't see that as a problem. I think there are other alternatives.
Okay. Is a woman who uses contraception criminally liable? And how would the state enforce that?
Once again, let's get back to the focus on life. The focus on the value of human life. I mean, you want to get into the contraception and, I'm sure that the state isn't going to get involved in going into someone's bedroom and looking at the contraception. What I want to do is make sure that our culture values life. And you want to go around the edges of it, but get right to it. Let's talk about life and whether or not it's valued or not. Or can you murder? That's one of the issues that is never in the debate. And that's where I think this bill talks about. You don't have to talk about nerve endings or contraception or things like that. Talk about whether or not you want to protect life. Is the state in that position of protecting life or not? Do we really believe that life is valuable? Do we really believe in life, the pursuit of happiness, liberty? That's the issue.
And I think those are laudable goals and that we need to consider those, but I also think that we all have to consider any unintended consequences because it's not necessarily in the bedroom, but certainly the state regulates doctors' offices and pharmacies and pharmaceutical companies. And many drugs are put on different schedules that allow us to use them for certain things or not for certain things. And that's what the state does. And if this bill interrupts those medications that usually women, I don't think there are any male contraceptives yet, but usually women take for family planning, I think that is something that we need to consider as legislators. I don't think we can ignore that in a bill that we are voting on to put into our code. So I appreciate where you're going. I appreciate your respect for life, but I think we need to be careful on the consequences that it may have on Iowa families. Do you have a plan for who will become the criminal in a contraceptive case, the pharmacist, the physician, or the woman who's taking the contraception? That's not in the plan at this time.
Could I ask a question? I'm not following the thing with contraception.
Let me explain to you.
Well, because the bill, moment of conception,
Yes.
that's it. Anything that prevents the conception, an egg and a sperm coming together to make conception, that's not here. We are respecting life when it happens. When the two come together and boom, cells start to divide into a person. That's
Right.
where we're at here, not in contraception.
And let me get back to Representative Heaton, what happens with contraceptions. There are three different ways that contraceptions work. One is by preventing a woman from releasing an egg, which would be acceptable under this law. One is by preventing fertilization, keeps the egg and the sperm from meeting.
Separate.
That would be acceptable under this law. But another way is by creating a change in the uterine lining so that it prevents the fertilized egg or the embryo from implanting. That would not be legal under this law, and we don't know in each circumstance which way the birth control is working. It is different every time. It's different on the time of day that a woman takes the medication. It differentiates on when she has intercourse, sexual relations. So we don't know how that's happening, and therefore I do believe that contraception could very well become illegal under this bill.
You're talking about the morning after pill?
No, I'm talking about birth control pills. I think there are some things that are implanted in a woman's arm now. There's also a shot that a woman can get every 3 months or so. All these are hormonal. There's also an IUD that there's some questions about how that actually works. So those would be at least 4 different types of contraceptions that are commonly used by Iowa family members, Iowa families who are trying to control their fertilization and control the growth of their family, that under this law would become illegal. And I have some concerns there. I am also concerned about a troubled pregnancy and what we can do regarding troubled pregnancies. As this bill is written, I think a woman is considered to be a legal guardian of a child as soon as the egg's been fertilized. Is that correct? That's correct. We know that prenatal care is essential for the well-being of a baby during its months in the womb. If a mother is not able to access prenatal care while she is pregnant, will she be criminally liable for endangering the welfare of her child?
No, not that I know of.
And is that stated in the law? Because we're saying, very clearly that life begins at conception, and so a woman is responsible for that life for the first 40 weeks. And is she criminally liable then if she doesn't take care of herself? If she smokes, is this child abuse? If she smokes, if she drinks alcohol, if she's obese, if she gets diabetes, if she overexercises and gets too hot. I know that's a concern for doctors, especially early in pregnancy. Is the woman now a child abuser? And do we have reason to prosecute her on that for
You
endangering?
have to go back to the intent again. Is her intent to kill the baby? No, it is not. So you're coming up with all these periphery issues, I think, and you're getting away from the real issue, is the intent to protect life.
I think legislative intent is very important, but if we don't have a law written to actually say what we intend to do, then all of this could be up for interpretation by somebody else, by whoever is enforcing this law. And we need to be very clear on what we plan to do there. For example, right now, I don't know, most women tend to go to the over the counter and get a pregnancy test. So you go into a pharmacy or a grocery store and you buy a pregnancy test. Is that woman now required, or is the doctor required to notify the recorder's office, which is where we notify at death or at birth, that there is a life that needs to be protected by the state?
No.
Okay. How do we plan to protect those embryos that are developing?
The greatest way that we can protect that is to have a culture of life that doesn't allow the murdering of innocent children. That is our greatest protection. And also, of course, there are other places that pregnancy centers and churches that'll step up and help. So I'm not going to be going in and trying to figure out, is there a fertilized embryo? We're just basically saying that we are not going to state, mandate, function, advocate, pay for abortion.
Now we're on to an issue that's near and dear to my heart, and that's infertility treatment. And when you said you wanted to be a mom, I can truly relate to that. I remember for many years wanting to be a mom and really struggling with that because of infertility treatments. And I am very concerned for the families who are building their families through in vitro fertilization is the biggest one because of this bill. The in vitro fertilization process creates numerous fertilized eggs in a laboratory, setting so that the technician has a plentiful supply with which to work. Well, they don't, not all of these embryos that are created actually become children. If one of these embryos does not develop normally in a lab or fails to result in a live birth after being implanted in the uterus, this frequently happens. Is the patient or the physician or the lab criminally liable for those embryos that didn't make it?
Once again, you're off on the periphery. Here we are talking about the intent to save lives. Is there intent to kill? No. I mean, you've got to get to this issue here, whether or not you think life is valuable and worthy of protection. And we're kind of skirting around on that. What is your answer to that?
My answer is that when we write legislation, we have to be careful to avoid unintended consequences that could seriously impact the lives of Iowans. And Iowa families that want to grow through in vitro fertilization are equally as important to me as Iowa families who grow normally. And I want to make sure that this law does not make it so that those women, their physicians, or the labs are criminal. That's my reaction to this. And we as legislators are responsible for doing that. And if we pass a law that says that in vitro fertilization would be illegal under this, that would be so damaging to so many families I know, and it would create the loss of some really incredible children that I know.
Absolutely.
And so I am very concerned that the words as you have them written, Representative Pearson, does that.
And I don't believe it does that.
I think it does.
I don't.
I'll skip through some of these questions, but I think this one is very telling. And frequently what happens is a couple goes through in vitro fertilization and they have numerous embryos, which are fertilized. It's an egg and a sperm together. They're fertilized. Some of them are implanted into a woman, and they, if 3 of them are implanted and 1 takes, that's a success. So 2 have now disappeared and essentially died. But what happens after one try? The extra embryos are then frozen, and there are lots of things that can happen. A couple has a choice. They can put them up for adoption. They can have them destroyed, or they can put them up for research. They can have them donated for research. Are those going to be options for those parents anymore?
I would say that you're talking about embryonic stem cell research.
There's the research, there's destruction, and there is adoption. Or there's implanting them in again.
Implanting, adoption.
Would be
but
the only
not-
options for a woman.
Not research.
Under this law. Okay, how about if those are frozen embryos and both biological parents are deceased? They have 2 children that are alive and running around, and both of the parents die. Are those embryos, do they get full rights of inheritance from the parents who are now deceased, so that would reduce the share of the children who were actually born?
I don't believe so.
So what happens to them?
What happens to them now? They just
Well,
stay
we
there
have 3
until
choices. There are 3
know.
choices. Right now, they can be destroyed. They can be given up for adoption. The woman can go through another cycle of her own. I guess there are 4 choices, or they can be donated for research.
And again, it's back to the intent of life. Here you are trying to say that they're inheriting something. Even, a child that it goes through a natural pregnancy and maybe dies. You're not asking whether that person inherits, are you?
Well, these are still
So we're
potential.
talking-
These are still potential lives. That they're potential siblings to these children who are alive. And at this point, it costs the parents money to actually keep them in the frozen state that they are in. I think it's a legitimate question to ask what happens then, since we are saying that they are alive, do they get inheritance rights on when the parents are deceased?
One of the things that you just said that I wholeheartely disagree. You say potential life. They are life. They have potentialities. They may grow up to be the president, but that's life, and that's what I'm talking about. Changing this culture from one that is so quickly goes to death to one that actually celebrates life. And I believe in vitro fertilization for some people, absolutely. And these are the issues that they're having to deal with. They're going to have to continue to take care of those eggs. And as far as the inheritance thing, I'm not. They won't inherit, as far as I can tell.
Well, it costs money to keep them, so they're going to have to inherit something. Thank you very much, Representative Pearson,
sure.
and thank you very much, Representative Heaton. This is just a very beginning of the questions that I have. There are consequences when we pass legislation, and we all know that. We can't pass legislation without looking carefully at the words that we are putting into law, where we're putting them into law. I know I have many, many other questions, but if we are going to impact contraception and we are going to impact infertility treatments, which the law as it's written right now absolutely will, we need to go back and look at what at how we can fix those problems. And I respect that we probably do disagree on whether it's potential life or life, and I know that you have a passion for that. But when we're talking about embryos in a frozen dish, I think that there's a lot of other potentials for it too, for saving lives in many different ways. So I thank you for your time, and I don't know if there are other concerns.
So if those concerns that you brought up were met, then you would agree that life is valuable and should be protected, and is that what you're alluding to?
I believe that life is valuable and should be protected, but we may disagree on how to go about doing that. Absolutely.
Thank you, Representative Kershell. Are there any other individuals in the audience today who wish to say something on behalf or against this bill?
David?
I can speak just, sorry, Representative, I'm behind you. I can just speak very, very briefly. I'm Kyle Carlson. I'm the Legal and Lobbying Director with Planned Parenthood of the Heartland. We are opposed to the legislation, and I would just simply say that we certainly understand that people feel strongly about this issue and have for a long time. But that our position is that while we may disagree about the reasons why a woman may choose to have an abortion, the circumstances are often so unique that we think that it's best that that decision be left to families in consultation with their doctors. So, I mean, I would simply leave it at that. And also perhaps to say that, along with what Representative Wessel-Kershell has said, there are some extreme unintended consequences here with how the law is written, as generally and broadly as it is written. So those would be the reasons why we oppose.
Is there anyone else? Yes, sir.
Beth, I think your
Would you
points are-
identify yourself?
Oh, Dave Leach. I think your points are interesting, that all of these, it's quite a list of possibilities that might result as a result of this statement of intent not being connected with specific penalties and definitions of actions. I think the simple resolution of this problem is simply to realize that there are the legislature, until there's so much public consensus that even this ought to be stopped, that there's support for passing it. And I think two principles which are legitimately keep from actually defending all life equally are, one is the culpability of the person. For example, a mother might be found to be less culpable than an abortionist because there's just not the awareness of what they're doing.
All right. I'm going to sign this bill for passage out of this subcommittee, and I'm going to offer this bill to my other fellow members for their signatures. If this bill passes, it will then, the next step will go before the full committee for human resources. And with that, I will sign an affirmative on this bill. I will now hand it to Wessel-Kershell
Thank you.
and Representative Pearson.
I will pass and hope that you at least address some of my concerns and that we work to address concerns of families in Iowa, the protection of it. I think this has some pretty drastic impacts on families, their reproductive health, and their family planning decisions that they will not be able to make after this bill passes. But thank you for the subcommittee.
And I will sign it, absolutely. I think it's a good step towards protecting all life. And it's they're valued for who they are, created in the likeness and image of God. Thank you for coming.
House File 153 will now pass and out of this subcommittee and now go before the full House Committee on Human Resources. And thank you all for coming, and thank you, fellow